On Saturday, February 24th, 2012, Take Charge of Change organized an event sponsored by Asante Capital Management. The event was a wellness symposium consisting of 3 separate presentations. This presentation was delivered by Maria Matthews. Maria is with the Alzheimer Society of Manitoba, and her presentation focused on brain health strategies as well as signs to look out for when loved ones might be struggling with the early phases of dementia or Alzheimer's. Like many health-related issues in life, the earlier the intervention, the better the health outcomes. We hope you enjoy the presentation.
So my background and the purpose for being here today is to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And you know what? It's a hot topic. And if you're not aware that it's a hot topic, just looking at the demographics in the room, then I'm here to tell you it is, and we need to be aware of that. So before I jump into presentation, what's probably the best place for me to start is to try and clarify what we know. And I would want to kind of get a sense if anybody really in the room can tell me that they're aware of the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Because that usually stumps a lot of people. Yes, do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, there's various types of dementias, and Alzheimer's disease is one of them. I think there's about 5 or maybe 4.
Brilliant. So just curious, your background in health, or you're caring for someone with the dementia?
I am a nurse, and my mother has frontal lobe dementia.
Perfect. Okay, glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing. So that's usually what stumps people in the beginning. They're not quite sure. They'll say, you know what, my mom or my dad or my neighbor has dementia. And we can say, well, you know what type of dementia they have. And it's like, I don't know. Thought it was just dementia. And it's not. So as this lady was astute enough to share, there's many types. There's actually well over 70, depending on who you talk to. Yeah, I know, it's a lot, 70 of them. Depending on who you talk to, there are probably more than that. But there are about 5 main dementias that we are challenged with. Alzheimer's disease happens to be the most common type of the dementias. It represents about 63 or 64% of all cases. However, there are other dementias such as vascular dementia. Are people familiar with that term in the room? I know you will be. Okay, vascular dementia, another way to flip that is probably if we just mention the word stroke. Stroke often is a case of some type of blockage, blood vessels into the brain, so it's not uncommon to have a vascular dementia. Not as prevalent as the Alzheimer's, but quite common. But the good news is quite treatable in many cases. I've met a lot of clients, very interesting stories. One couple who was down across the line shopping, and all of a sudden the gentleman just drops because with his stroke, obviously he lost one side of the body. And they, take him right to the hospital, and 3 hours later, he's on meds, he's stabilized, he's back out shopping with his wife. But during the course of those few hours, many signs of dementia, confusion, slurring of speech, pasty color, perspiration. So, these signs that we see can be very daunting and, full of fear for us. But until we actually get some help and get some idea where, our situation really is at, it doesn't always have to be bad, dark news. I mean, one thing I know Mike can attest to, and this is just the other side of it, is he as a marathoner and I as a ever hopeful half marathoner, still not quite made my goals, but done it a few times. We see a lot of dementia-like symptoms in the last mile of a race. Oh, yeah, right. Sure, people are extremely dehydrated. Many of them are. Particularly when they have those great parties the night before the marathon, okay? But no, you'll see people, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, dehydration. They're lying in the grass on the side, medics are attending to them. And you know what, quite often they just need some hydration. They maybe need to get their feet up and their heads down and relax and cool off. But so when we talk of dementia and we get into the signs and symptoms, I'll walk you through them gently because you'll see how they can present themselves to the point where you're alerted to this could be a problem, or presented to the point where you can think, well, maybe it's just something else. Maybe I am just dehydrated. Okay? All right, we'll see how technically challenged I am. Okay, rising tide. A couple of years ago, the Canadian Alzheimer Society commissioned a report for a snapshot, an overview of what's happening in Canada with dementia, what's happening with all of us baby boomers who are coming into older adulthood, and the population is just exploding. So they took a look at what was happening provincially and as a nation. And just some very quick statistics. In 2008, there were roughly 500,000 people in Canada diagnosed with dementia. And they look at the next generation, talking about us baby boomers who are coming into that older adulthood stage. And really what it's going to do is it's going to over double in the next generation. So 500,000 to, I didn't put all the numbers. It goes from 500,000 to about 1.2 by 2038. And really a simplistic way of looking at their predictions is currently we're diagnosing dementia about every 5 minutes in this country, and in the next generation, over 20 years, we'll be diagnosing it every 2 minutes. So it is quite prevalent. This bottom stat here, and I know Sean showed me the pointer, but I'm technically challenged too. So this bottom, this informal caregiver, this is really significant because informal caregivers are you and I. Okay, we're the unpaid folks. We're the ones who are caring for our parents or aunts or uncles or neighbors because they don't have the resources, whether that be physical resources or financial resources, or just the know-how to navigate the medical system. So the informal caregivers is the real scary part about what's happening in our society, because you know what, healthcare realizes they can't possibly build enough beds in personal care homes or beds in hospitals to take care of what's coming. So it's very significant that we look from an economic position of what's happening. And the labor side of the informal caregiver hours currently $9 million a year, in the next generation increasing to $22 million. And that's just Manitoba stats. Okay? So we're worth a lot of money in our health. All right. Again, just an overview of where those numbers are, the 9 million to 22 million. Now this is the reality, age is a factor. Sometimes when I go out to speak and different participants will ask questions about, well, who gets it? Why haven't we heard of this before? Why is it so prevalent now? So we kind of go back a bit and we try and look at really what's been happening. We have always had dementia. It's just for many, many years people just said, oh, he's just senile, or she's just senile. So we really didn't start to take a long, hard look at this until about 1970. And then we started to get the researchers more involved, and they started to really dissect it. Testing became a little bit more specific, and the testing has really evolved. It's quite substantial now. They can't yet conclusively tell you what type of dementia you have, but they can pretty much take a look at a slice of a brain. And if any of you are familiar with looking at a brain, I don't know how many of you are, but depending what way you look at a brain, if this is kind of how the brain looks when you look down at it, and it's got all these gray squigglies with these lines in between, an atrophied brain actually separates quite a bit. Those lines in between the brain become like last summer, which was a very dry summer, where everybody's yards, those divots just cracked right open, right? So that's what a brain looks like, and if you slice it open and then open it and look down this way at it, there's a bunch of nothing, big black holes in the brain, where what we can see is it's atrophied. We don't really have to say, well, is it an Alzheimer's or vascular? We can just tell it's a dementia, and what has atrophied is not coming back. So age is a huge factor. Very simply, 1 over 3 of you at the age of 85 in this room is going to have a dementia. Okay? The numbers start at 1 in 50 at the low age. Between the 75 and 84, they increase, and then the 1 over 3. Okay, so I know you have this as a handout, but this is always interesting. Other than memory loss, And without looking at your little slides or your handouts, can anybody name some warning signs that you're familiar with seeing? Other than memory loss.
Confusion and disorientation.
Disorientation, yeah, excellent. So time and place, great. Anything else? Crankiness. Yeah, we see a lot of crankiness, a lot of frustration. And I'm going to speak to why you see a lot of that. What else?
Difficulty with speech.
Difficulty with speech, yes. Anything else that you could pop right out? Yes?
Putting things in the wrong place.
Great, great. Putting
Like your
things
keys in the oven, or
Yes.
just putting things in the wrong place.
And I know Christine, so good morning. Yeah, and that's an excellent thing, because you know what, I want to just touch on what she said in the memory loss. If it was just memory loss, we would all have dementia. Okay? So let's just breathe easy and realize I've said it now. You're okay if you've forgotten where you put things. But it is a concern to me if you put your keys in the oven. Okay? It's also a concern to me if you forgot that you were actually driving. Okay? So if my mom and I have, if she has a dementia, if she's still driving, and she drove last, I say, okay, you know, Mom, I need the car, can I have the keys? Oh, what keys? Well, the car keys. You know, the car keys, Mom, you just had it. Well, no, I didn't. You must be wrong. You know, so that whole vacancy of that she even had it. Okay, so it's more specific to just putting things in the wrong place. So let's just take a quick look at what these are. Memory loss and forget, that affects day-to-day function. So that can be anything, you know, keeping a calendar of events, you know, knowing that I'm going to the doctor's on Tuesday and losing track of the fact that, well, when is Tuesday? You know, I might make up, and we all do that, right, on the long weekend. How many of you on the Monday thought, well, it's Sunday today? So, you know, even those of us who are cognitively well have that problem. Difficulty for performing familiar tasks. Now, people always look for the tough things, and what I want to point out are the easy things. People with dementia can look at their runners on the floor and forget not just which one is right or left foot. That's why we often see people with dementia having the shoes on the wrong feet. But they can also lose sight of what the heck is the shoe for. They may lose track of that. We often see people later stages of dementia with a toothbrush trying to comb their hair. Okay? There's actually medical terms for this type of behavior, but that happens. They just get confused on what the task is or what the tool for the task is. Okay? Disorientation to time and place. This is very significant because if you have a parent that you're caring for who still lives alone, you can see them, you know, at one time a day, and you can see them at another time a day and not realize that they actually have not changed position. You might just come back into the environment and think that they've done a few things in the last couple of hours, and they will tell you that they have. My grandmother has dementia for years. I kept saying to her, "You still going to church, Grandma?" "Oh, absolutely, every Sunday." "Well, that's great. Glad to know that. And how about your daily walks?" "Oh, I went today." Fabulous. I knew for a fact she hadn't been out for a walk in 6 months. But in her mind, she had been, and that's all that really mattered, and we were communicating on that. Poor decreased judgment. This is significant. This we see a lot of problems with, and you hear about it in the newspaper when you hear the sad stories about the people who get out and wander. This lady was talking about wandering. But we hear the bad stories in the winter when the folks go out without their shoes or their slippers or their coat, and they're found frozen. Okay? So it's not that necessarily forgot to put a coat on. They might not have thought they actually needed one. Okay? Flip side of that, in summer, it's not uncommon to see people in wool sweaters, long sleeves, and it's 90 degrees outside. And you know what? Trying to convince them to maybe change into something a little lighter. Well, let me ask you this. Who here has ever cared for someone with a dementia? Okay, out of those who raised their hand, how many of you ever tried to argue with someone? Okay, here's some advice. Don't. It never works. Problems with abstract thinking. Okay, a complicated way to look at this could be a ring of house keys and taking the keys out to let yourself either in the car or the front door and not knowing which key is which key. often that happens. But it can be more simple than that, and I want to take you back to the basics. How many of you realize that making a pot of coffee at home is a complex task? Because you know what? You have to figure out how many people are going to drink it, how many scoops of coffee do I need, and how much water should I put in. And if you don't put the filter in, then there's a problem for sure, right? So you have to really think through those steps. And we often take for granted, just because we've got this lifestyle and experience, because we're aging, that all these things that we can do in our normal day lives, you know what? Often we do these things without thinking about it, right? It's second nature. Well, when I talk about healthy brain in a few minutes, I'm going to come back to that point about things that we do and not have to think about. Misplacing things we spoke about already. Changes in mood and behavior, I'm going to come back to this. And changes in personality, very similar, and a loss of initiative. Now, ironically, in the book that you have in your package, and we talk about this a lot in the society, they list lack of initiative as number 10 in the warning signs. And we often say, you know what, that's so backwards. Even for us, we can say that about ourselves. Loss of initiative really is the first sign that you will probably pick up as a warning sign in someone that you're caring for. And you may not know it now because unfortunately so much about this disease is hindsight. We gain our experience traveling through it as caregivers or people living with disease, but we don't really learn lots until unfortunately we might have to do it all again. But at least we've gained some knowledge. But the lack of initiative is the fact that people with an Alzheimer's or a dementia need prompting. Just like I said, you may not realize you go in the morning, come back at noon, and you don't realize she hasn't left that chair. If there's nothing that's come into her environment to stimulate her to get up or do something, it's not unlikely that she might just stay in that chair. So what is a stimulation? It could be someone coming in and saying, geez, you know, it's almost lunch. Are you hungry? What would you like? That's a prompt. It's lunch. It's time of day. It's like my grandmother. If you're going to church, absolutely, still go to church. But she hadn't been. Lack of initiative and she not knowing what time or day or place she was in. So we see people start to withdraw from activity, often with aging folks who may have had a history of always going to the ballet or always going to the Jets game or the Bombers game. Then all of a sudden you start to see that these people aren't renewing their season tickets, or they renewed them and haven't been going lately. So you just see an overall withdrawal of life, really. So what remains as things start to fall off people's wagons? What remains? Social pleasantries, sense of humor, and long-term memories. And I'm going to just touch briefly on these things because you know what? So much about an Alzheimer's disease, because people don't have a lot of initiative, they don't often initiate conversation. That's why if you go up to someone with an Alzheimer's or a dementia and say, you know, good morning, how are you? They very quickly will look back at you and smile and say, well, I'm well, thank you, and how are you? Because that is so familiar to our older adults. That's just how they are. That's how they've always behaved. They're very, very open and welcoming. If you said to someone, you know, oh, that red sweater looks fabulous on you, well, thank you. You know, they still know how to take a compliment. However, we'll just jump out on a limb. I might, you know, say to my mom, hey, my friend Mike's back in town. Mom, you haven't seen Mike for a few years. I'm going to encourage Mike to come over and say hi. Well, that would be lovely, dear. So later on, I bring Mike over and I say, hey, Mom, do you remember Mike? Well, of course I remember Mike. How are you? You're looking great. Yeah, like that black shirt. Yeah, geez, your hair is a little different. You know, and you think she's having a great conversation, it's all connecting, until you sit back and think about it, that she really didn't say anything specific. She's defaulting to all these social pleasantries. So we as informal caregivers, as family, we often don't think anything's going on because we haven't picked up on that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention about communication, because it's not on my slide, but because I handle health lines and I do a lot of counseling, I want to say to you out there who may have parents who are still living alone in the community, that if you're calling your mother or your father daily or weekly, fabulous. But you know what? Nothing takes the place of the personal physical visit when we look at the world of dementia. Because if you phone mom or dad daily or weekly or monthly, and it's like, well, how's it going, Dad? Well, great. And you're having this conversation, Dad sounds good, it's all great. But then another sibling goes and visits and says, you know what, he's lost 10 pounds, have you seen him lately? Or, the food, I opened the fridge and there was mold on there. Or there was this that I saw or that. So it's just I'm putting it out there. You have to be aware of the dementia, the 1 in 3. If you have a parent who's in that 75 plus bracket, then be aware that you need to keep in physical contact to take an inventory of their health. Okay? The 3 to 30 rule, this is very significant. Most of us in our memory bank, our emotional, social memory bank, what resonates the most with us and what we will hang on to, even with the dementia, till the very end of our life, is what happened in our life between the ages of 3 and 30. This happens for all of you. Okay? If you think right now, this very moment, some of the most important things that happened in your life between your age of 3 and 30, you'll come up with a whole bunch of things. And sometimes they're often a happy thing. Wow, my first child, I got married, first day of school, my first pet, first car, first job, lots of happy things. But you know what? Think of your parents. We have a lot of parents in our province who are immigrants, and many of them have come from countries that maybe were not as comforting for them. Many of them have left in the middle of the night with belongings that they left somewhere else, with children they left somewhere else. I mean, horrific conditions. And you need to really think about where your parent came from when they were 3 to 30, because if they develop a dementia, a lot of these behaviors may start to manifest again, because it's coming out of the past and presenting in the future. Okay? I have clients who have been alcoholics or dried many years, develop a dementia, and the spouse will say, I don't get this. I know they're not drinking, but you know what? I'm back in the abusive relationship again. The behavior is coming forward. Okay? This is really important because as people, we talked about they get stuck on words, they have problems with language. You need to communicate facing them. I said physical visits are really important. You have to face a person that you're communicating with. You can't be doing the dishes at the sink, talking over your shoulder and thinking that your father is going to know what you're talking about. People need to be attended to visually, physically. Touch is important, and the smile. It's not uncommon for a parent to forget your name or who you are. What we prefer you don't do is go up to your mom or dad and say, hey, remember me? What's my name? And we see and hear a lot of that. And the reason for those type of behaviors out of caregivers, particularly children, is because they're grieving on their loss. And they want to be validated. They want to still know that mom or dad remembers who they are. They have to kind of remember that caregiving is about them. So I really encourage, if you have a parent or a neighbor or friend with a dementia, even though it sounds kind of weird, always introduce yourself. If I go to see my father, it's, hey Dad, it's me, Maria, your baby girl, or whatever, birthright level I am. It's not uncommon to reintroduce. He may say, well, of course I know it's you, dear. He may say that, but you know what? There's going to be days where he doesn't know it's me. So get into that habit. Communication. Now, as disease progresses and people decline in ability, they can still communicate. They may smile, they may nod their head, they may wink, but you know what they really pick up on is you. They pick up on your energy. Okay? So when we talk about what is your communication, verbal, tone, and nonverbal, so as you're listening to me right now, really only 7% of what's coming out of my mouth is what you're getting. A lot of what I'm doing is body language. I'm moving forward, I'm moving back, I'm raising my voice, I'm making it quieter. All this is speaking to you, just as this body language speaks to people with dementia. If you're frustrated, if you're in a hurry, and you're trying to get things done, and you're tense, and you're now, talking louder, and you're raising your voice, the person that you're caring for is going to pick up on that and back off of you, or will not react appropriately, not be helpful in what you're trying to accomplish. So just remember, how you present yourself is how they are picking up and reading the situation. Very quickly, because this is important, and I'm not trying to demean adults with dementia or anybody with chronic disease, but I want you to see this. I have a couple dogs at home. I come home from work, and it's always the same thing. If you have a dog, your dog's just there loving you, so glad you're home, so happy to see you. But when my dogs were pups, and it was always a crapshoot, and I shouldn't use that word, but it was kind of a guessing game coming home, and in a couple of days you come in and it's like, oh yeah, I'm so happy to see you, and then it's like, oh, what's over there? Who did that? And you know what? Tails are down. Right? Okay, so I'm making light of that, but I'm driving home the point that you're communicating with someone with dementia. They pick up on those things. Your tone of voice, your change of demeanor, your stance. They'll get that. So please remember to take a breath, speak slowly and clearly. Okay, these are just some visuals. Okay? And you know, a lot of caregivers, like that older gentleman in the corner, start to look like that after a while. Because you know what? It's pretty darn tough to be a caregiver for a chronic disease. All right, just a little bit more on communication. Structure questions so that choice can be realized or recognized. Practice active listening, which is looking, maintaining contact. Working on short, simple questions. It's really important if you're communicating with someone that you offer them choice. Geez, it's almost lunch. Would you like soup or a sandwich? It's not, geez, it's almost lunch. I'm starving. What do you feel like? Lack of initiative. Don't know. So, choice. Very important. Use leading questions to prompt a response. It's like, hey, it's lunchtime. You're getting hungry? Come on, we'll do this. Okay? Prompts, visual, body language. Continue on the same subject until you're finished. Speaking in proper techniques with dementia, really what you have to realize is there's a lot of clutter in rooms. Lighting can be up or down, noise levels can be up or down, too many people, not enough people, it's too warm, it's too hot. It's all individual to who you're working with. But you have to realize that they cannot function on me involving a dialogue saying, hey Dad, it's almost lunch, we'd like, super sandwich, I'll be right with you though, and hey, how are you? Nice to see you. But Dad, what do you want? Okay, you can't do that. You have to really focus and stay on one topic at a time and finish. Okay? It's like customer service, I always say. The most important customer is the one right in front of you. Okay. Healthy brain. So, people say, okay, now what do? You're scared of the numbers, 1 in 3, if I live to 85, do I really want to live that long? Okay? But what can I do now? Well, there's things that we all can do. And you know what? It's nothing magical at all. And that sometimes disappoints the audiences because they realize it really boils down to you and what you can do for you. So let's start with the most important things. You need to have moderate levels of exercise. And I've been working in the fitness industry for many, many years. They change guidelines about every 4 or 5 and really mix us all up. But moderate exercise really refers to increased respirations. And what I basically say is sweat. It's not just a case of always going for a walk around the block every night, that they're really looking to encourage people to become more fit. But not to be negative, if your exercise routine is daily walks, thank goodness for that. That's a really important thing that you're still, able to get out and focused on daily exercise. Eating a well-balanced diet. I mean, there's a big correlation between diabetes and dementia. If you're not aware of that, I think it's a good thing because it brings more people's attention into their health. But if you're not familiar with Canada Food Guide, you need to start understanding it because you have to take care of your fluid levels and your balance, your sugars and your cholesterol levels. You need to know your numbers. Protecting your head. It's not just a case of using a bike helmet or a ski helmet when you do those activities, but more so for older adults. It is about encouraging mom or dad to use their walker when they finally bring one home. Because you know what, I've seen a lot of older adults. I used to work in retirement, so assisted living buildings, and they'd get their walker, and it's a huge ding on their dignity for many, okay? But you know what, go knock on their suite, and they toddle to the door, and open the door, it's like, well, where's your walker? Oh, I don't need that thing. Well, yeah, you do, you know, you do, and it's a good thing to have. But the other advice for a lot of older adults living on their own is a lot of women in particular, they have lots of scatter rugs. Part of what they have in their generation. They're everywhere. And you know, that's the worst thing for older adults. So if there's some carpeting or scatter rugs that are significant, you know, have them dry clean, put them on the wall for art so they're still part of their life, but they shouldn't be on the floor. Stimulate your brain, okay? Do you have to do the Sudokus and the crosswords? Absolutely not, because if that doesn't interest you, then why would you spend your time doing that? So often my advice is, you need to, I brought this up before, you need to really engage your head. If there's things that you have been doing in your daily life that you could do with your eyes closed, my best advice today is stop it. You should not be doing anything that you could normally do with your eyes closed. Tying a shoelace, most of us can do that with our eyes closed. Tie it differently. You know, learn how to write your name with your other arm. How many of you this morning, just as an example, here's a visual we can all think about. How many of you this morning when you get dressed, you put your pants on before your shirt? Pants with people first. Okay, some of you have to even think about that, right? Okay? So I'm going to assume the rest of you are tops first, okay? Tomorrow morning when you get up and get dressed, do it the other way. Okay? Those of you who put the pants on, say, oh shoot, she told me top first. I want you to do it tomorrow when you're getting dressed, okay? So it really is about just doing things differently. If you have a favorite chair in the living room, that is your chair. Guess what? Move that chair here and get a different viewpoint. Okay? Social engagement is the #1 tip I can give you all to ward off dementia. If you're going to get it, you're getting it. I'm sorry to say that, but you can actually push it further. You can keep your brain and your body physically active and healthy for a much longer time. You just have to make the commitment to yourself that you're important enough to do that. Okay? All right, that is the end of my presentation. I'm sure Sean's going to see if he wants to come up and do the Q&A. And I didn't talk about the frustration piece, but if someone wants to address it, I can answer it. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Maria. So, Maria's graciously said that she'll spend a few minutes in the Q&A. What we'll do is we'll start the Q&A, and while we're doing that, please feel free to... Janelle, are the refreshments ready now?
They're just bringing them down.
Bring them down. So you can kind of slowly mingle in that direction. We've got some refreshments for you, but we can begin the Q&A. Okay? We'll do it for about 10 minutes or so, so if you have some questions, we can fill in those. So please feel free to begin a dialogue with Maria. And again, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Cheers. Yes?
Do you see increased correlations between mental health issues like depression and dementia?
Excellent question. You know, in the early stage, people get confused. They're not sure if they're seeing a dementia or what's going on. So we talk them through what's happening in that person's life. And is it possible it's just a depression? Because maybe if we treat that, we'll find out that it's not necessarily dementia. That social engagement part that I spoke about, that's so critical. Nothing good happens to anybody that stays on their own too long. And not to say that some people who are introverts need to become extroverts in order to have good, healthy brains. That's not true. Lots of introverts can be socially stimulated through pet therapy, you know, cat, who demands love and attention and nurturing. You know, maybe they are going out grocery shopping and things like that. So it's not always about making people who aren't extroverts to have social engagement. But what we do caution about, if there is a diagnosis of a dementia, and that's what we're hoping for, early diagnosis, is it's not uncommon to have depression flip right into that. It's like any other type of chronic disease that you're diagnosed with. Depression slips right into that. So I don't know if I'm confirming or answering your question appropriately, but we're not seeing increased dementias because of increased depressions. We often see depression as a fallout of a diagnosis of a dementia. But to be able to recognize that is huge because they can look the same. So good question.
Is there a relation?
Yes.
Is there a relationship between family history and dementia?
Okay, is there a relationship between family history and dementia? Yes, there is, particularly if there is a diagnosis before the age of 65. And this is huge. If you have a parent or both parents who have a diagnosis before the age of 65, there's 50% plus chance that you will develop a dementia. Okay? Yeah. Yes?
Where can informal caregivers go to get support and advice on the caregiving?
Okay, great question. We do a ton of it. If you're not familiar with our website, you should Google it because it's got a ton of educational opportunities. First of all, support for caregivers. We have support groups that meet monthly in just about every community of the city and many areas of the province. So if you call us, we will connect you to a support group. But our provincial office downtown, we actually facilitate groups for people with dementia. We work with people in early stage of dementia on education and for future planning. We want them to be involved. You know what? They want to be involved in their life. They want to know what's going to happen. I mean, once you get over the initial sting of it, unfortunately, the support groups for people with dementia are very functional. We have trained people in rec therapy who work with these clients, and it's no different than you folks. You're here for probably Sean and Asante as a common interest. You all have some common goals in the room, and when you bring like-minded people together, lots of good things can happen. So we're very proud of the work we do, and we interview applicants for groups with dementia. As far as care support groups, we can just link you to that. Yes?
In what part of the medical system are you? How are you funded? And how can we help?
Oh, thank you. We receive less than 2% of our funding from government. The rest we raise. So we're always open to donations. We have a number of activities during the year that we do for fundraising. Again, those are found on our website. One of our largest activities is called Memory Walk. It happens every June. It takes place at the Forks. We raise about $250,000 just from that event itself, but a lot of it comes from wills, bequests, donations, that type of thing. Okay. Anything else? I'm going to just take a brief moment and talk to the frustration piece. I promise I'll be brief, but this is really important. The reason why we see such anger and frustration and behaviors like this with people with dementia, particularly in the early stage, is because, let me put it to you this way. Would you all agree that nobody knows you better than you know yourself? Okay. People with dementia in the early stages, remember I talked about those social pleasantries? They're working overtime in the beginning. They know something's not right. They are afraid of what's happening. They're 57 or 68 years of age. They've been operating pretty well all their life. And now they're forgetting things and they're missing appointments and I can't remember your name. They were driving home and got lost. And they know things are falling off their wagon and they're internalizing all this angst. And they're frustrated and they're scared because they're working overtime and not letting you find out because they don't want you to freak out or worry. And then, they're internalizing and they're upset, and this can go on for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years before you really know what's going on and get them to a doctor. But what's happening, let's think of it this way. Remember I said your strongest emotional memories happen between 3 and 30? Well, people with dementia, men revert back to 3 to 30, and women will revert back. It's no different for the sexes. But I want to ask you something for the men in the room. When you were a young boy in the schoolyard and things were not going your way and they were getting a little tense and feisty, how did young boys handle things in the schoolyard? With fights, like aggression, right? Girls in the schoolyard getting picked on. We weren't included in the right group. Things weren't going our way. What did we generally do? We cried, or we told our mom or our teacher. So very different behaviors. So let's bring the clock forward 70 years, and we have the man now internalizing for years, full of angst, upset, and now all of a sudden we're seeing these frustrated behaviors. Well, he's frustrated because things aren't going right, and he's reverted right back to his 3 to 30. So when his wife comes up, because she hears yelling in the garage and things are falling and what's going on, and she sees her husband's upset, and she goes to put her arm around him and say, "What's wrong, dear? How can I help?" And he backhands her. He's reacting. He's not mad at her. He didn't want to hurt her. He's reacting. It's much easier for a male caregiver to put his arm around the wife, because we are going back to 3 to 30, where we wanted to be hugged or held. Does that make sense? So when we talk about that frustration piece, please don't see it as just a bad reaction to dementia. It is. But you know what it is? It's a call out for help, to recognize something bigger is going on and take a long, hard look at that and sit down and talk to that person really about how they're feeling and get them to a doctor. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the presentation delivered by Maria Matthews with the Alzheimer Society of Manitoba. We trust you got some good practical information, and if you need more information about what the Alzheimer Society does, we'd encourage you to go to the website. If you'd like more information about Take Charge of Change and the symposiums that we can run for your organization, or our other programs and services, don't hesitate to visit our website at www.takechargeofchange.com. As well, if you'd like to have information about the wealth planning solutions offered through the financial planning practice of Sean Humphreys and his financial planning group, you can visit Sean's website at www.seanhumphreys.com. There's information about his practice as well as the wealth management solutions offered through a